Alrighty. Alrighty. Well, welcome to our first few attendees. We're just going to give probably a minute here, let people start to trickle in. We're all really excited to welcome you, talk about this awesome topic. So we'll get started in about a minute here and go from there.
We all want to know how we can get our Racers 360 shirt.
We need to, we've been looking into how to make good quality ones affordably. So if anybody here has the contact with the good quality, that's what we're looking for.
I've got a couple contacts for that, but this stuff ends up getting super crazy expensive. So.
It's hard for sure. Well, I'd say, we've got 30 people in here now. Awesome. So let's kick things off. You guys all good with that?
Good. Awesome. It is 10 a.m. So let's do it.
So first off, thank you to everyone for coming out and joining Racers 360. We're excited to talk about a topic that I'm super passionate about that made a big impact in my career. And I know it's probably one of the most important things that we can all learn, which is how to train your mind. So before we get started, I want to make a few introductions. We're joined by some fantastic coaches here with Ken, Phil, and George. Ken, do you want to introduce yourself, give everyone a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah, thanks for putting on this webinar, and it's great that Racers 360 is investing in this, and that's one of the reasons why I got involved with Racers 360 is we really need this wider reach, and to be able to do it, of course, in modern times with technology. So it's great that Racers 360 is doing this, and the fact that the cost is right, which is it's free, and we want to be able to show people that there is a way to get better, especially away from the track, and that's something that a lot of people think that oh my gosh, I'm only going to get better if I'm behind the wheel of my car or on my motorcycle, and there's so much behind the scenes, and just a quick introduction with myself. Is I started riding motorcycles pretty late in life. It wasn't until basically age 30 that I got my first motorcycle. And as I went through, I realized that there was a lot of what I should be doing, but there wasn't a lot of how to do it. And because like a lot of people that are on this webinar as well, because of the personal responsibilities that I had and the consequences of the sport, there just wasn't a clear, concise way of doing it. So for me, again, with work and kids and mortgage and all these things, there just wasn't a clear, concise process. And so that's what I worked on was making the process that worked for me with all these things going on in my life. And as I got better, I got to be a better club racer, did my first professional races at age 41. And was top 10 in AMA Superbike at age 41 on not great equipment, and was able to get top 10 in the country. And then as a trainer, right, as a coach, is building this methodology and building the curriculums that we use today. In my career, where this basically did happen organically, because people are like, wait a minute, this works. I have a process to be able to do these things. And my success as a trainer at a very sharp end, the last 3 years in Moto America, which is the highest level of training or racing in the US, my riders have over 140 podiums in Moto America the last 3 years, it's basically about a 95% podium rate and about a 40% win rate. So it's not too horrible.
And he was my coach.
Yeah, and that also, but that's at the sharp end. But we also look at the very beginning end as well, and that's I think the hallmark of what I do and my instructors do is that it's we take the same technique and we allow that technique to be used for anybody. There's a great article in Road Racing World magazine this month where I got a rider. She was ready to quit the sport, outdone. And realize, wait a minute, there is the right fundamentals, and what are the order of the fundamentals? And she's now kicking butt, and she's actually doing the editing on my book stuff right now. So it's awesome. So that's a quick little background and I think that's it's super important for people to understand that yes, you can do this. Yes, there is proper methodology for you to succeed in the sport.
Absolutely. So look. The talk about how to train your mind it can be a very broad topic with a ton of information there. So our goal today is really to introduce the topic and give you some actionable steps that you can start doing in regards to how to use your breath to regain focus, how to get a routine ahead of time, how to set goals and triggers and anchors. With that, just a quick little housekeeping, for lack of better words. We've got the chat open here for everyone. Just click on the chat button. It'll open it out. Converse. Let's engage. If you've got questions, please ask them during. But we will also have a dedicated kind of Q&A time at the end. Try to give out 30 minutes or so. So if you have a question that you absolutely want answered, the best bet is to hit that Q&A box, leave it in there, and that'll give us chronologically what we'll be able to answer at the end. We're going to try to answer those questions that are on point during the webinar, but with this topic, it's very easy to go off into the weeds, and we want to try to be giving this information in a way that makes sense. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Ken.
Yep.
Hopefully everyone can see that. If it went full screen on your end and it hides the chat, you can hit the escape button, and that should minimize the full screen look on your end. So hopefully that all makes sense. As always, if you have questions, just leave it in the chat for Q&A. And I would say, let's kick this off.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think for the people that are tuning in, is I realize that, yeah, we want this to be very interactive. We're going to be doing this and kind of having a conversation sort of between ourselves. But yes, please ask your questions. We want you to get the individualized attention from this, and make sure that there's going to be a lot of information. So hang in there, and yeah, for sure, get your questions going. So, all right, are we ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I think the way to start this off with is just to quickly dovetail with what Dion said, which is there are so many aspects to the mental side of the sport, and our goal today is to make you aware of them, and then give you some sort of overview or some things that you can at least take with you and be able to work on. And I think it starts with understanding that when you look at what we're doing, whether you're riding a motorcycle or whether you're driving a car, it is an athletic endeavor, and we need to look at that and approach this as a sport. And the more that we're able to do that, the easier it is for you to see how you need to train for it. Because if it's a sport, it's completely trainable. So there's 3 elements of an athlete. And the 3 elements of an athlete are simply the technique, right? The craft, what you do. And the second element is your physical fitness. And the third one is the mental fitness. All 3 of these have to be looped together. And it's simple, right? You can have the best techniques and you can have the best mental fitness. But if your physical fitness isn't there, then that doesn't work. Or you can take any one of these out of the equation, and they don't, the whole package does not work. So, and real quickly is, yes, we're always trying to make our techniques better. We're trying to hone them and constantly working on the techniques. Your physical fitness. If you look at your physical fitness, the way to look at your physical fitness is simply, the fitter you are, the longer your mental fitness and your techniques can stay engaged. Because as soon as your physical fitness, drops off, whether it's, Road Atlanta in August or Thunder Hill in August, or it could even be super cold, right? Anytime that your physical fitness gets challenged and you lose your physical fitness, then your mental fitness drops off immediately, right? Your focus. So again, something that has to be trained for. And the one that we're going to concentrate on today is the mental fitness. And the mental fitness is simply allowing access to your techniques. Because if your mental fitness is compromised, whether it's compromised, whether you just got an email that you didn't want to read before you go out on your session, or the fact that, you didn't get enough sleep, or you're nervous, or whatever it is, if your mental fitness is blocking access then to your techniques, yeah, it makes it incredibly, incredibly hard. Doesn't mean you can't do them. It just means you can't access them. And I think that is what's super important, because these get more important as the stakes get higher. And ultimately what we're trying to do is, of course, execute perfect fundamentals under stress. So, how do we make that happen? So I think the first part of this is understanding that you want to treat yourself like an athlete, and then break it down into these three different elements: the technique part, the physical fitness part, and the mental fitness part. Each one of these is completely trainable, and we have to spend time in each one of those zones to make it happen. So I wanted to start with that. So I want to move on then with okay, great. You're coming into whether it's a track day situation, or maybe it's a racing situation, and we all get nervous, right? The night before, you're getting nervous. As you're sitting out on hot pit getting it rolled out, you're getting nervous, and I think it's extremely important to understand that it's perfectly okay to have those nerves. Absolutely perfect, right? It means that you're going to enter something that has a little bit of a unknown element to it. Perfectly okay. And as one good friend of Phil and George and myself, right? He talks about fear, and it's perfectly okay to have fear, but fear hasn't happened yet, right? Fear is something that hasn't happened. So what we're trying to do is, okay, what are the things that we can do that give us confidence to mitigate the upcoming action, to mitigate that fear. And one of the things that I love the best is Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield said, yeah, as you're sitting there strapped in, ready to go to space, he goes, you don't cross your fingers, right? So you're not going to go enter this crazy environment unless that you have some sort of a plan for what you're going to go do, right? Do you have a plan that's going to go mitigate the upcoming risk? So if it's as simple as, yeah, I'm going to go do a track day, and my goal, right? Because we can't put our plan together unless we have what that goal is. We can't reconcile those two things, right? We can't reconcile what we're going to do, what our plan is, till we have our goal. If your plan for that day is, you know what, I'm going to have a really great time. I'm going to enjoy my car. I'm going to enjoy my bike. I'm going to stay out of trouble, and I'm just going to have a great enjoyable day. Awesome. Well, then how do we do that, and how do we put a plan in play for that? If you're racing, and maybe it's the last race of the year, and you're tied with points with somebody, and it all comes down to this one race. So what is your plan to get to that success point? So where confidence comes from is having a pre-plan of what that situation looks like, and then looking at all the different scenarios and then mitigating a risk for that. Mm-hmm. And the more that you can prepare for it, right? The more that you can run these scenarios, the more that you spend that time with, we'll talk about some visualization things as well, the more confidence you're going to have in that situation. So having a prearranged plan with techniques for the upcoming situation, that's really where the confidence comes from.
And just to jump in there, I always like to talk about things in different ways in my experience. And this is, to be candid, first time I've heard Ken talk through all of this. So I'm sitting here learning as well, which is cool. The one thing that I always felt in my career was fear is something that we all are going to experience. And it can be something that you can use as a positive or as a negative. And before I was able to really have a good grasp and start learning about performance psychology and how to develop confidence and how to start training my mind, what I noticed was when I didn't have that plan, the fear would lead into something called negative brain chatter. And that's that voice in the back of your head, like, how the hell am I going to do this? What am I doing out here? That just it's sitting back there and talking and chatting, and that's what really has a huge negative impact on confidence. But as soon as I started to develop that plan, I was able to control that focus and turn that the fear, the energy that's within you, into a positive. And I was able to to mitigate that negative brain chatter by having the plan, by focusing on the tools that I have developed to bring my focus in. And that's been it's such a small thing, but as you're going to notice here, it's little elements that can seem like just easy and seem like so natural, but when you put them to work, they have such a big impact on being able to focus on the right things. Would you agree with that, Ken?
Yeah, no, that's it. So the deal is that, as I said, it's perfectly okay to have emotion, right? Emotion's fantastic. Emotion's what gets you up in the morning, right? Emotion's what, got me going to do my PT work this morning, right? Before I go for my bicycle ride later today, right? So emotion's what draws you to that. Emotion's what puts you there. The trick is you don't want emotion to be your technique. So you want emotion to lead you to your technique. You want emotion to give you the desire, but it's to trigger your technique. And I think that's super, super important. And let's linger here for a second, because I did this keynote speaker talk at Nike a couple years ago, and that's back when they had their slogans, and the slogan was 110% every damn day. And they asked me about that, and then so I said, they said, well, what do you think about that slogan? And I said, well, I think it's bullshit. I said, and the reason being is because there's only 100% available, and the problem is, if you're using that extra 10%, right, that it's like an afterburner on a jet, right? It's not sustainable. And the problem is that when it goes away, you fall well below your 100%. So what we're trying to do is train to make our 100% broader and stronger, so we can use that.
Yeah.
So emotion's great. Emotion's fantastic. Great. But we don't want emotion to be the technique, because it did exactly what you just talked about, which is it gives you those negative emotions as well. Yeah. So this is where we'll talk about it as well. It's what are the triggers that take you from emotional to technical.
Just to expand on that really quick, there's a coach that I used to work with that's a world expert in more of the physical performance. He works with a lot of NFL players, MMA players. He was kind of my coach on the physical aspect, but he's written books on coaching, on leadership, on the mental state. He's actually recorded a really quick audio course for our Train Your Mind section. We'll talk about at the end. And essentially what he titled it was What Drives You? And in that, he talked about how you can have emotions and you can have short-term motivation by maybe listening to a song or getting pumped up at 110%. But you can't sustain that. Like, that's not sustainable. Drives have to come internally, and they're gonna ebb and flow. And finding that calm middle state is what allows you to consistently perform. So I think let's go ahead and move on to sort of the triggers, the anchors of what actually techniques are.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So this dovetails really nicely. And before we get into this part of it, I would definitely want to talk about the routine. Is to dovetail on the confidence part. Is really what it boils down to is a mindset of being proactive versus reactive. And right, proactive, what is a proactive thought? And we always want to be in a position to have proactive thoughts. There's nothing wrong with being reactive, but we'll talk about that. Because proactive, it's time available to make decisions, and you have more decisions to be able to make, right? So if you have the time, you're coming up to a corner, and if you've scanned down the track and you've looked at, okay, I can see my brake application point, and you've got time to do it. You're like, okay, I got time to, what kind of corner is this? How's my initial braking going to be? Where am I going to let off the brakes? Where's my turn-in point? You have time in your brain to be proactive with it. If your vision, for instance, is only in front of the car and you're all jacked up and you're looking in your rearview mirror, okay, now that becomes reactive. And of course, we can't be as precise when that happens, right? So I think a lot of this, when we go back to this, where does confidence come from? It's building up your toolbox of proactive responses versus reactive responses. And because reactive is fine, it's just, they become much more limited at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could totally look back in my career and know when I've jumped into the car and I wasn't in that right frame of mind, it's almost the same feeling as when your eyes, like you mentioned, are too low. Things just come at you so fast, and you can't help but just react, right? Like you don't feel like you're on top of it. You don't feel like you're totally in control. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah, no. That's totally it. And yeah, I mean, again, it's just giving your brain time to make more decisions. So yeah, I mean, let's talk about. I think what I want to do is we can talk about breathing. I know you want to talk about some things with breathing, and the visualization ends up being, of course, a huge deal. And I'll talk a little bit about visualization, then we'll talk about some of the routine stuff. And I think visualization is an incredibly important skill. And it's setting time aside, whether it's, before you go to bed at night, or whether it's, you get to the track and, before you actually go out for your session. It's taking the time to visualize what is the outcome that I want, right? How do I want that outcome to be in the best possible scenario, and then work it backwards, right? Do I have the tech? Do I have the right tools available for me to have that success? Like if you're, and of course, how do you reconcile those? Are those appropriate goals for that session? For instance, if it's an early, March morning in Sonoma, and you're thinking that Sonoma Raceway, and you're going to go out for a personal best lap time, probably not the best time for that to happen, right? The track's got no, it's green, it's cold out, there's just not enough grip available. So we want to, have appropriate goals for that session and visualize that, and then work the equation backwards. Do you have the right tools available to make that happen? And then of course you can adjust as necessary for that. I think that's incredibly important on that time. But I think the big point of that is take the time to visualize what you want to accomplish from that session, and then reconcile it with, am I in a position to actually make that happen? So I think that's super important. And I want to segue here real quick. Phil or George, you guys are very good on this as well. Do you guys have any quick comments on that? And for the people on the webinar, Phil and George are two of my key instructors. They've been working with me for many years. And they've got great insight on these things as well. So Phil or George, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, Ken, this is Phil. I'll just maybe one quick thing. One of the, I guess, principles of our methodology, the way that Ken and George and I coach, is to try to keep things very simple and practical, and, give our students and the folks on this webinar, very simple things they can implement right away. So when I think about this topic of where does confidence come from, to boil it down and make it really simple, for me, it's confidence comes from only one place. And Ken talked about it, Dion talked about it. Confidence comes from what you say to yourself. For me, that's where confidence comes from. So it's managing that internal dialogue. And, if you're saying confident things to yourself, to access your technique and put yourself in a good frame of mind to drive or ride at your potential, then you're going to be optimizing your technique, your physical performance, your mental performance. But that's how I think of confidence and where it comes from. It comes from what you say to yourself, and to manage that internal dialogue. Obviously, you have to do a lot of work away from the track to kind of create dialogue that's going to support your best performances and deal with all those unexpected things that come up. So managing that internal dialogue, having mindfulness to be aware of what's going on in your head, and what is your internal dialogue, and then managing that to pull out your best performances. But that's simply how I think of where confidence comes from. And an example of that is, I've seen so many examples of world champions, Olympic champions, UFC fighters, people who should be the most confident because they've been in the best in the world and multiple times. And as soon as they step into the arena, they're doubting themselves. So I don't think, confidence, a lot of people say it comes from past success or from training or from preparation. but there's plenty of examples of guys who have all that and still are not confident because of what they were saying to themselves when the cage door closed or the car door closed, or they stepped into the Olympic arena. So I think having very effective internal dialogue of what you say to yourself, to say, I have a great car, I've done all the practice, I know exactly what I'm going to do on every corner, I know which corners I'm going to get on the throttle early, I've done all the physical work, I've done all the mental work, I'm ready to go, let's get after this. That's positive internal dialogue. Or doubting yourself and putting yourself in a negative mindset is detractive. So yeah, that's what I would put in all that work that's needed to manage what you say to yourself. That's how I think of where confidence comes from.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and I love how you said kind of keep it simple. And this kind of leads really well into the conversation on breathing and actually how to quiet your mind. And where I learned this is I was lucky enough in my time to learn from some of the best trainers in the world. And I found myself in a place called Formula Medicine in Italy. They train most of DTM drivers. They train most of the Formula One grid. They work with professional cyclists. They are really one of the top centers in the world when it comes to performance psychology, and they focus a lot on biofeedback. So with all the tools in the world, and they love to get different experiments, I was there, and I was with a few other kind of world-class drivers who better than myself. And we had a few different mental tests for biofeedback. So we all had heart rate monitors on. We're sitting comfortable as can be. And we had some straps around our heads that were measuring different brain waves that can measure your intensity, measure your calmness. And we were all competing against one another in different mental training games. Super simple stuff, like a word would flash on the screen. It was the name of a color and whether or not it was actually the same color as what was written. So it might say black, but it's in blue, and you have to say false. And you have to go through these as fast as possible and be consistently right. We're all sitting calm, not moving, but our heart rates are 140, 150 beats per minute, right? Crazy that it can be that straining to be that mentally focused. And the harder that we tried to beat one another, the worse we got and the worse we got. So the performance psychologist took us aside and really focused on one thing. And they have all the tools in the world, and they essentially focused on breathing. And they had us sit there for 5 minutes and practice what's called square breathing, which is a deep breath into the belly, about 1 to 2 seconds. You hold that breath in 1 to 2 seconds, exhale 1 to 2 seconds, and you hold yourself breathless for 1 to 2 seconds. And you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And what's happening when you focus on your breath is you're bringing your focus more internally on yourself. By giving yourself that goal of, this is how I need to breathe, you really can't focus on that email you got or on, man, I need to win this race, or on the factors that don't really matter. You have to focus on yourself. And as you bring that focus inward, you become much more aware of that mental chatter that's going on in the back of your mind. I can't tell you how many times I raced, did a poor job, and didn't realize until that next day that, man, the whole time I was racing, I was thinking about that apex I screwed up on, or I was focused on, is my team manager happy with me, or why are we not winning? All these things that don't really matter in that specific moment. So the goal of breathing is to bring down that anxiety and be able to bring the focus inward so that you can stay tuned with that mental chatter. And as you start to build breathing as an anchor, you're going to be able to start to use it to refocus. No matter what, you're eventually, if your races are long enough, you're going to lose focus. I don't care. It could be Lewis Hamilton, one of the best drivers in the world. In his races, he has to continually refocus and bring that focus back to the task at hand. It's his ability to understand and notice when that brain chatter starts to pick up and tune away from it quickly and effectively is what really makes him special. And that's what we have to build outside of the car first. so that we can start to do it in that stressful environment. And Ken, you speak really succinctly and greatly about doing stuff in a non-stressful environment first so that you can start to do it in a stressful environment down the road.
Yeah. And if everyone listened to what Dion said, it was fantastic, right? What he did is he separated himself from an emotion into a technique, right? So suddenly he had, we're all jacked up, everything's crazy, and, you're letting your emotions run away from you. And, between what Dion said and Phil said is now you're engaging a technique that allows that internal conversation. And I think that is such a great focus and refocus trigger. And that's something that we've actually got built into this talk a little bit. And hey, let's just talk about it now. This is great.
Yeah.
So there should be, we need to have an initial focus trigger, right? Everything's going, you just change your tires, everything's going crazy, you're rolling out on hot pit, and oh my God, I did torque those down, okay, everything's great. But now you have to go drive. Now you have to go ride. So you need to separate yourself from that, and we need an initial focus trigger. Personally, my focus trigger is I roll out of hot pit on my motorcycle. I stand up on my foot pegs. I sit back down. I am in the moment. When I'm in a car, when I roll out on hot pit, I'll put my hands in the position on the wheel that I want. When I put my hands on the position on the wheel that I want, I am now, that's it. My brain, that is my focus trigger for the task at hand. And that separates my emotion from my technique. So suddenly I'm engaged, I'm looking for my reference points, etc. The refocus one, and this is such an important part. And again, this goes and loops what Dion and Phil said, is having a refocus trigger. And my particular refocus trigger is eyes. I literally internally say to myself, eyes, because if I say eyes, then suddenly I'm now looking at my next reference point. And if my eyes are engaged in my reference point, then my technique becomes re-engaged. Scott Russell, Mr. Daytona, World Superbike champion, and pretty darn good in a car for not being a car racer.
You can wheel it.
Oh, yeah. Trust me, I've ridden and driven with Scott a lot. That boy can do both. Incredible. Scott's refocus trigger was exhaling on entry. So in other words, at turn in, he would exhale, and that relaxed him. Because holding his breath at turn in, whether it's on the wheel or whatever, right? Suddenly, everything becomes super tense, and he's not able to relax through the corner. So his refocus trigger was exhaling at corner entry, and that was a game changer for him. Same thing with, again, to back up what Phil said, which is, if you're doing that, again, the internal conversation is my technique is re-engaged, and yes, I can go do this. Yeah, I think the focus trigger and refocus trigger are super key.
The one thing I learned as I was trying to use triggers to help me find that right mental state early on, it was inconsistent. And the more that I worked on it, the more consistent it got. But the one thing I found that helped me was kind of step one was being able to describe or put words to the feeling of how I felt when I was at my best. So early on in my career, I had, before I went on track, maybe it was like 4 to 5 words. I don't remember all of them, but I do remember the main one was precision focus, in the moment, on the task at hand, to the exclusion of everything else. As I put my helmet on, I close my eyes, I said that to myself, and I focus on my breath. Now, I can't say that entire thing to myself every time I'm on the track, but by using those words over and over and over and over again and combining my breath with that, my breath has sort of turned into the trigger itself. So now I don't need to say those words to myself. But if you find, and this is just something that worked for me, it doesn't work for everyone, but if you find yourself struggling to find that right mental state, sometimes really being able to put your own words to what it feels like to you. Most of our words will be pretty similar, but your own words, taking the time to work through those words with your breath, as you do that over and over and over again, you'll start to build faster triggers. And you'll be able to say eyes. You'll be able to condense that down. turn into like a refocus trigger. It's what worked best for me, at least early
Yeah,
on.
no, it's great. And one of the things that George and Phil and I have developed is we build an internal script. So as we ride or drive around the track, we help our clients with building, we literally build their script for every second on the track. So whether it's brake marker, or exit, that means they're staying engaged to that. So it's a great focus technique to build your own internal script as you go around the track. And of course, then the whole idea is you make that script, tighter and shorter and better. So yeah, same idea.
So I would say let's talk a little bit more about visualization. And I kind of covered breathing. We've talked a lot about this. The one thing that I like to talk about, and Ken, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this a little bit here. But for me, the important thing is also timing. I found for myself that the time to visualize was ahead of going out on track. An hour before, 30 minutes before, not right as I'm putting my helmet on or getting in the car or hopping on the bike. For me, the time that I'm hopping on the bike or getting ready to go out in the car, that's the time to focus on my breath, on my triggers. I treat visualization as the work that I put in ahead of time so that I know what to execute on. And now when I'm getting out there, I don't want to be visualizing anymore. I want to let myself just do it. Do you look at it in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, visualization goes back to what I said earlier, which is it's your pre-planning. It is, what is needed to go accomplish the task at hand. And yeah, pretty much visualization is over, right up until you're rolling out a hot pit or putting your helmet on. It's over at that point, because now you've got to go actually accomplish the task at hand. And then you'll use the techniques with the specific report cards for that. So it's like, okay, I want to, let's just say, again, it's that last race of the year, you're tied with points and you're racing with somebody that has, slightly faster car or faster bike than you. So it's like, I need to make sure my slowest point of the corner is as precise and as early as possible so I can have a better acceleration. So it's like, I visualized it. I know what I need now to accomplish the task at hand. And now I'm going to let technique take over to do that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's the same exact thing. Yeah.
And just for me, a couple important things on visualizing, because I think you can actually do it wrong. There's two things. For me, visualizing, it's pretty mentally intensive. We have their practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. Meaning, the meaning of that is really, it's so easy to be lazy with your visualization, and your brain will revert back to visualizing what you're already doing. But you really want to visualize what you want to be doing. And it actually is quite hard to visualize something in a different way than how you're doing it in real life. And you want to do it deeply. Like, visualization should hit on as many senses as possible. You should smell it, you should hear it, you should feel it, you should see it. You want to really put yourself in the environment. The more that you do that, the more real it makes your brain. But if you can't visualize yourself doing it, how are you ever going to do it in real life?
George, you have a very good saying for this about practicing. Do you want to let us know what that is?
Yeah. So there are kind of two levels of practice. One is what amateurs do, and amateurs will practice something until they get it right. And once they've achieved getting something right, they move on to the next thing. Professionals will practice until they can't get it wrong. So they will get it right, and they will continue to do it until they're absolutely sure that every time they do it, they get the result that they want. And it seems like maybe a small difference, but in reality, it really leads right back into confidence. If I'm going to go out and do something and I know that every time I do it, I get the result that I want, then I have confidence.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
No, I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, that is actually what separates an amateur from a professional. So yeah, that's exactly it. And then,
I mean, like, from the technique side of things, as we coach a lot of drivers on Races 360 on the car side and the motorcycle side, it's all small margins. Like, the difference between your amateur and a professional, if you look at pure lap time, it seems insurmountable, it seems huge, and it can be quite large. But it's lots of small things that add up to large quantities at the end of the day.
Yeah, so we have a very good friend that I was speaking with again this weekend, and he's the #1 special forces trainer in the country, and incredible guy. And so years ago, he calls me, and a little bit out of frustration, and he says, Ken, do you get the call, like, guy wants to come train with you, but he's like, I only want to come train with you when, like, your best athletes there, your best, racers there, because I want to know the secrets. Because he goes, I get the call that, hey, JD, I want to come shoot with you, but I only want to, shoot when whatever the special forces guys are there. And he's like, dude, they're just better at the fundamentals than you are. There's no secrets. There's no secrets to that.
Yeah. And anyone that's trying to say, hey, I've got the secret or some fancy technique that's overcomplicated, run away. It's simple, fundamental basics, and you build those up, and you'll achieve more than you ever would have thought you could have.
Yeah. Hey, so before we move to the next one, actually, no, consistency is great, because I do want to have a quick little blurb on routines. And I think the routines are super, super important. And if you look at, like, for instance, Valentino Rossi, right? What does Valentino Rossi do before he goes to his motorcycle? It doesn't matter if there's 2 minutes left in qualifying and they just put a Q tire on the bike. He does the same thing getting on the bike every single time. And again, it's building these routines. So let's quickly talk about a routine and what is routine. And a routine is a series of fixed actions that are regularly followed. And when we build our own routines, whether it's when you get up in the morning or whether you arrive at the track, you build your own routine. And it's as simple as, how many times have you heard, it's easier for me to load up my stuff than it is for you to help me load up my stuff at the end of the day. Why? Because you built your routine. And what a routine does is it takes all the things that are important in a specific order and eliminates the things that aren't important and gets rid of them. It just organically happens. It just naturally happens. So embrace your routine and embrace the things that you're not maybe doing now, which, for instance, like Phil says, right, which is the mindfulness training. It's incorporate that into your routine. Make it part of your routine, because, again, funny, I was telling you guys before we started, I just had a great call with a very high level mental performance coach that we consult with. And she says, yeah, I mean, the hardest part is getting people to do it. So have a routine, develop your routine. Absolutely. Then add the things that are important and then take away the things that aren't important.
It takes you doing it. And, I think this is starting to go away, but there was this mentality previously where it's this kind of quasi-science field. I can tell you now that the science is there. And there might be a hesitation on certain terms like meditation, for one. I'm a big believer in it, but just because I do it doesn't mean it's right for you. You have to find what's right for you. And the only way to do that is like what Ken said, consistently doing it over and over and over again. And you'll start to build that pathway to finding the right spot, getting rid of that mental chatter. It takes repetition. There's a lot of opportunities to do it every single day of our life, because it doesn't need to take an hour. It can take 2 minutes.
You can get better at this sport 30 seconds a day.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, you're not going to get there. It's the joke of, Steve Martin, the comedian, says, if I practice the banjo 5 minutes a day, pretty soon I'm going to be pretty good. So, yeah, but you got to do it.
So, Ken, I think the next 2 sections are kind of bringing this all together. And something that I really enjoyed on your audio course, you talked a lot about your plan, your routine ahead of the weekend and then in weekend. So I think this is kind of for everyone out there listening. I know we've been talking now for 45 minutes. Things can get tired. This is a really important section here.
Yeah. So I know we have spoke a lot, and of course, yeah, I get accused of talking a lot. I guess that's okay. So in here, all of this kind of comes back and gets reconciled from what we've already spoken about. One is goals. Whether it's a long-term goal, short-term goal, we need to have a goal. And there's even mini goals. There's mini goals for every corner, right? But we also want to have long-term ones. And one of the things that we really recommend for you to achieve the success you want is have a very long-term goal and then work that goal backwards. Whether it's, hey, where do I see myself in 2 or 3 years in the car scene? Where do I see myself in 2 or 3 years in the motorcycle scene? What can I accomplish this year? This year, our goals are going to be completely different than we started a few months ago because of the complete shit show that's going on. So it's okay to change your goals. There's nothing wrong with that, but have a goal. And then as you go to reconcile those goals with things that are happening now, what does my upcoming situation look like? And how do I reconcile that with my long-term goals? So absolutely be able to do that. And it's perfectly okay. It's again, like we're so lucky. Our group is very, very lucky. We've got this incredible peer group that we deal with. One is a Top Gun pilot. And the Top Gun pilot was simply was telling me about a week ago when I talked to him, he says, it's like the limits, right? The limits are constantly changing. That's okay to understand that the limits are constantly changing. But your goal is to maximize what's happening there. So goals are great, but realize that we need to have a long-term goal and short-term goals and reconcile those. The anchors of our triggers, the focus and refocus triggers, establish that routine of getting a focus trigger and establish the routine of getting a refocus trigger. Incredibly, incredibly important. And you heard some great things of how we can do that. And the visualization as well. I mean, this is such a big deal as Dion says, right? As I visualize things, I know what it's like to burn to feel the rear tire, burning off on an exit, or to feel the thing, just going in with the right amount of brake pressure and the steering wheel just getting where I want. Okay, but it's not too much, right? I know that's that feeling that I'm looking for. And if I visualize it, right, then I've got a goal that allows me to get those things done right. So I think these are things that all happen before you get to the track, and these are things that we want to establish before you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many opportunities when we talk about how to put it to work away from the track. For instance, building anchors. Like we talked about how the mind and body are one. Just a minute before your workout, just spending that minute to focus in on your breath, go through those anchors as if it was you're going out on the racetrack. Use that opportunity. Or if you have a meeting, even waking up in the morning, going to bed at night, taking that 10 minutes to visualize. There's so many opportunities that you can treat things as if you were going to race. For me, every workout.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's the same thing. Phil has the best saying in the world, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. I mean, that literally is it. And that's something that from Phil, I completely take to heart, right? Is making sure that we're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go and then talk about during the weekend, which I think is the last slide before we'll open up to all the Q&A side of things.
Yeah. So I think this is super important, right? During the weekend, right? So it's mini goals that help meet your big goal. And it's like I said, right? So if my goal is to run a lap record at Sonoma or Carolina Motorsports Park, am I in a position to make that happen in that particular day, that particular session? If I'm going out there in the first session on completely shagged tires, well, no, I'm not going to meet that goal. But what can I do during that session that will get me to that goal? Can I make my slowest point of the corner as precise as possible and memorize that? Can I work on my exit reference points? Can I work on my initial brake application, right? So give yourself mini goals for that session that reconcile with your bigger goals. Right. And that goes along with, I'm telling you, this is the hardest one, which is giving yourself permission to execute that plan. It's so difficult. You're going out, and let's say you're going out for qualifying, and you've got tires on that are going to last you 10 laps, but the session you can do 20 laps in. And it's not going out there and throwing your brain out there, following somebody you shouldn't be following and burning up your tires and ruining your qualifying session. Giving yourself permission to establish precision first and then put your Q lap in, right? It's so hard to do, but giving yourself permission to do that. And then, yeah, making sure that, you know, again, the visualization. It's important, the visualization before the session and the visualization after the session. How did I do? How did I do? How am I able to put this, you know, back into play? So I think these are super great and super key.
Just to jump on there really quick. I know that I think it was Angelica, if I can get the chat open on my end, had a question earlier where she said, I've heard that you should practice like your race. My only option to practice is a DE-style track day with all sorts of passing restrictions. How can I train my brain? I think what you just said, that ability to have mini goals and the ability to check in on your mental chatter while you might be following someone that you can't overtake. But being able to check in on how's my brain doing? Am I able to refocus myself? Sure, you might not be able to practice your techniques, your braking, or your overtaking, but you can check in on your mental consistency and mental performance, even if it's not the specific same environment of where you're competing.
And to follow up on that with Angelica's question is, you know, that practice like you race, you have to be careful with that, because that typically comes from, I'm looking for a lap time mentality. And where does a lap time come from, right? A lap time comes from having the right techniques and building on techniques. And it's like Dion said, yeah, I get stuck behind somebody. Well, guess what? I'm going to work on my slow point of the corner precision. I'm going to work on my exit. Am I taking away steering wheel angle on the exit? Am I picking the bike up on exits? How is my brake graph look? This is an important one. Am I able to run the script in my head when I can't get by somebody? So these are the things that make your overall racecraft better. But yeah, you may not have a lap time. That's the way it goes. The environment is not there for a lap time, but there's a gazillion things that you can practice when that happens. And so you actually are practicing like you're racing, but it's not for the lap time.
That's, you know, it's interesting. One of the things I didn't think about before we sort of launched Races 360 and started talking with all our drivers, riders, one of the hardest things about this sport is measuring improvement. I think a lot of people look at only their lap times, and how they're improving. But just because you're not going as fast, you can't, if it's raining out or if the temperatures are so high that the track sucks, you've got to be able to have other ways to measure improvement, measure success. And I think a lot of people are missing these mini goals because it's not talked about.
Yeah. You know, every, in my methodology and how we do things, every objective that we had, and we've got, you know, literally hundreds of objectives that we try to meet. Every one of those objectives has a specific report card that you can have an objective result from. So it doesn't matter. Even if I want to work on whatever the precision of my slow point, I want to work on my brake graph. All these things, a lap time is because of all the things that you did well. Yeah. So each one of these has to be built up into its own little objective with its own report cards, with its own results, so the lap time can be good. And that's literally how it is.
Yeah, and just one thing I had on the last slide, I should have included in this slide. We talked about how the mind and body are one. I can't stress how important sleep is. Ahead of the race weekend, during the race weekend, one of the most important parts of my race weekend routines was taking naps. I promise you, like on pit lane, ready to get in the car, a 10-minute nap was like a go-to for me. So just, it sounds so basic, but everything is pretty basic when you break it down. Making sure you're getting that 8 hours of sleep. And I'm a big believer in naps. I would look at the schedule and I'd literally try to schedule in 10 minutes of a nap. into my race weekends every day. So not everyone's a napper. Out of race weekends, I'm not at all. But during race weekends, when I know I've got to go perform, that was a pretty integral part of what I was doing. So
I'm old. Naps are great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say what we want to do now is kind of open up the Q&A. Just really quick before we get to the Q&A, I do want to say a special welcome to everyone. All our Racers Lounge members, we really appreciate you guys being subscribers. We've got some special guests from the SCCA DC region, also from Mazda. Thanks for coming out to joining us. We also have some really cool new features as part of our Racers Lounge. For anyone that's not a subscriber, I'm going to throw a link in our chat here in a second, but I do want to just share kind of what you can expect here. So Racers Lounge is kind of our spot for all our webinars. You watch recordings, watch track guides. On the car side, we have 40 plus track guides. Motorcycle riders, Ken's already got about 5 up there. Our other coach, Mike Edwards, who's actually with us here today. Thanks for joining in, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Those. Really fantastic video and written guides. But also, we've got a brand new section that is all based on performance psychology. So we're here in this guide. This is Ken's Train Your Line Like a Champion. He's got these 4 different mental courses or audio courses. I've got one. We've got one coming out with a PhD in performance psychologist that's a consultant for the Golden State Warriors, Pittsburgh Penguins. We're going to be doing a lot of different audio sections. We even have a guided meditation for you to listen to before you got on track. That may not be for you, but I would say give it a try. I'm a big believer in it. It just helps walk through that pre-race routine that we want you to build. So we're going to be here supporting you beyond just technique coaching. We want to be helping you on everything there. So,
Hey, Deon, real quick.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to join this?
This is less than $10 a month, so $100 a year.
Yeah. How much does a track day cost?
4 times that for just one day.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, yeah, plus all your investment. Yeah, so
Yes.
whatever.
Exactly.
Anyway. Yeah, so you want to do the Q&A?
Yeah, let's do the Q&A. So our first one here, Corey, absolutely will the webinar be able to watch after this is over? Yes, all webinars at Racers 360 are recorded, and you'll be sent that to you. Just while we're talking here, I've got 2 more questions to go through this. If you kind of scroll over our faces, go down to the bottom, click that Q&A button. You can type your questions in now. We'll try to spend about 20 minutes here if there's enough questions to go through these. So let's see here. Now that we are social distancing, the alternative to practice and training is through racing simulation. Does this work to train your mind in a real race situation?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've got a bunch of clients that I'm working on. I'm actually working with a bunch of clients. We're coaching them through sims right now. We've been doing it actually since the beginning of the year. And absolutely, if you tried doing a 35 or 40-minute sim race, holy moly. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It works. So all of these things, it's the same thing, whether it's off or on, and the focus triggers, refocus triggers, the same thing, reference point, all that's the same stuff. So yes.
Yeah. For me, actually, I am probably, when it comes to how close the sim is to real life, you hear a lot of people talk about how it's really close. I would say from a technique perspective, the sim can create some bad habits. It can create some good habits. But from the mental perspective.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, Deon. Yep. Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
We actually have an article. It's a free article. How to use, I think it's like, if you go to racers360.com, click education, type in sim racing. It's how we use sim racing to improve. And it's all on building mental strength and mental endurance and practicing different things for your mind. That's the way to use it. So Mike, can you send your slides to us? We absolutely will send the slides out. This is a great question from Samuel. Specifics on how to refocus after a crash or spin.
Yeah, so I've got a great podcast on that, which is how to get over a crash or spin in this case. And it's again, this is where the refocus trigger comes into play. You can't take the spin back, right? Sorry. But what you can do is basically start your lap on the next apex, right? So get going, get back again, and start over again and re-engage your technique. So again, if I run wide in a corner, or I rush an entry, or I don't get direction, whatever it is, I'm basically going to start my process on the next reference point, because you're not going to get it back. And you can sit there and kick yourself and bitch and moan and screw your whole session up, or you can get right back at it and get your technique re-engaged with a refocus trigger.
Yeah, refocus triggers are huge. And just to expand on that, for me with crashes where you might be done, you might not be going out there, the process that I'm a believer in is first and foremost taking the time to understand what happened, and then understand what you could have done differently. But at that point, once you get there, you put it behind you and you go back to focusing on things you can control, focus on your triggers, and you go out and execute. Sort of like building that plan and then allowing yourself to execute. But if you don't understand what happened and whether you need to get coaching to figure out what happened to be sure about it, or whether you can do it yourself, I think it's important to take that time. This is clear. It's not beating yourself up about it. It happens. But taking an analytical approach, understand what happened, and then going back to focusing on your triggers. Would you agree with that, Ken?
Yeah. And again, this goes actually what Mike actually just wrote in the Q&A, which is there, right? You analyze what went wrong after the incident. And that's it. That's exactly it, which is you take the time afterwards, after like you come back in the pits and go, okay, why did I spin? Oh, I had too much brake pressure at turn in, or my initial throttle was too abrupt, or, oh, I didn't have direction, whatever it is. And then you realize, okay, that becomes a technical thing, not an emotional thing. It allows you to be able to fix it.
That's awesome. So another great one here from Nathan. How do you get your mind in a more of aggressive qualifying mindset versus a more conservative and defensive racing mindset?
Yeah. So Nathan, that's a great question. And what it boils down to is make your fundamentals more precise. So work on with especially with my riders is we start off with the exits. We all know that exits are what matters in this sport. So the two things that we do to focus on that is we want better exits. So we focus on our exit report cards, whether it's a shift point, a rev limiter point, whatever it is, we focus on our exits. Is my slowest point of the corner as precise as possible? And then we back that up with, how is my brake pressure at turn in? So in other words, how am I able to manipulate that? If my exit is better, then I'm gonna have more speed coming into the next situation. So we really focus on, we start that with, I want to have the best possible exit as possible, and then I want to be in the best possible position with brake pressure at turn in for that corner radius. So that's how we look at it. And yeah, it's easy to be jacked up, but again, that emotion's not going to do it, because that emotion, like Dion said earlier, is allow mistakes. We double down on our technique at that point.
There's one of the more interesting things that I was able to learn from the guys at Formula Medicine was there's a difference between mental strength and endurance and mental intensity. And what you'll find is you'll be able to hold a really high bit of intensity. Now, the clear distinction here is intensity doesn't mean like, I got to go for it, right? Like qualifying, you're still calm, relaxed, but you're just that little bit more mental intense. But that's going to up your heart rate. And we know as our heart rate starts to come up, we're going to fatigue faster. So one of the sciences that they really dive into is, how do you have that intensity but focus on keeping your heart rate low?
Yeah.
And the more that you can have intensity with a lower heart rate, the more you can extend that intensity over a longer period of time. And the more you practice that, the more you realize there really, like, for me, there's not a difference in how I race versus how I qualify from a mental perspective side. There's fundamental slight differences in the grip of the car, but
your tires might have more grip, or you might have fresh brake pads or whatever, but that's it.
Yeah.
Hey, so I want to answer all three of these questions at once.
Awesome.
Oh, hey, Joel. Joel's a great client that just chimed in. So with Devin, Angela, and Ben, and these are all very similar questions. So I'm going to start this off with, there are 5 specific reference points for every corner.
Can you say the questions out loud or just one question so people?
Well, yeah. So the questions are, what type of mindset when racing lap after lap would you recommend having to maintain consistency, right? And not just feeling like your hair's on fire every corner. Another one with Angelica, you had a great race, your best race ever. What should you do to figure out what made it great? And what would you do to find that mental state again? And real quick on Angelica's, which is, yeah, in other words, you don't have a report card for what made that right. So we need those report cards. And then with Ben, right, I struggle with, getting in the zone or the flow, especially in the sim. Dude, the sim is so hard for this. So, yeah, and then what you're trying to do is catch a competitor rather than leading. Yeah, this is, again, you get emotional. So this is not having your script built, and your script is based off of your 5 reference points. Every corner has 5 reference points, which is your exit apex, your entry apex, your slowest point of the corner or where you let off the brakes, your turn-in point, and where you apply the brakes. What we're trying to do is establish every corner has all 5 of these, and we are trying to build our inventory of reference points so we can have segments between each one of these reference points. And if you have the segments, again, what can be measured can be managed. So if you have each one of these, now you have an objective way in your brain and as well as your lap timer of being able to measure these things. So my recommendation on these things is start with your reference points. Yeah, this is where, quite honestly, the question about the sim driving is we spend our time, especially on the sim, with our eyes and our vision and our reference points. We build our inventory of reference points that we can continually come back to so we can make each one of those segments more intricate, more precise, and make them better. And this goes along with, again, Angelica's question, right? So if I don't know how, I don't know how I did that. I did okay. Well, if you don't know how your exits were, those are the best exits I ever had. Oh, now I got something. Or, wow, that's weird. I had the best race ever. My slowest points were the slowest they've ever been because they were the most precise. So we need these references so you know how you did. So for all of those questions, I really recommend building your 5 reference points per corner and then running your segments through those.
Yeah, that's awesome. So next question from Corey. Do you recommend doing race pace in practice to work on mental fitness? Not all the time, but a few laps.
Yeah, I think that those are almost like two different questions. Okay, Corey, actually, let's talk about that. What should I be focusing on? How's that?
Yeah.
And where it starts with is focusing on exits first. So we focus on exits first. Okay, so how do we get a good exit? We get a good exit by having precise direction, precise slow point of the corner. So if we focus on the slowest point of the corner, we focus on our exit first, because our exit reference, our entry apex, and our slowest point, those are fixed. Those don't change. What changes is our turn-in point and our brake application, depending on your speed and environment. So, Corey, I really think in this case, focus on your exits first. When do I have direction? Focus on your slowest point of the corner, and then you can focus on the entry part, because the entry part becomes adjustable with that. So if you're trying to put the entry first, no. So this is what we should be focusing on at the right time so you can build the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's a great way.
Really out of that. So next question from Joel, and I'll jump in here really quick on this one. It says, is there a way to analyze my mental training routine? I've been doing luminosity and meditation daily, but I'm not sure it's having the intended effect. Just really quick, something that we are working internally, to be candid, this is probably a couple months away, is building in different games into our application so that you've got a center for your coaching with Ken. You can listen to all of the audio courses on mental performance, and then you can go and practice. Biofeedback, it's not the ultimate answer, but is a great way to kind of stay in tuned on how you're performing. There's lots of different ways to be able to go out and do that. So we are working on that so it can be the one-stop platform. But I'd be interested, Ken, what are your thoughts on how do I analyze my mental training?
Yeah, actually, Joel, awesome question. And with Joel, what I want to answer that is, can I stay focused longer? And if I can stay focused longer, then yeah, you're improving. Those luminosity games I gave you, Joel, how frustrating are those damn things? But that was the report card, is can I stay focused longer? And if I can stay focused longer, then yeah, I know that I'm improving.
And even that could be as simple as we talked about visualization, right? Like being able to visualize a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth. You're getting yourself more in that environment.
Hey Ken, this is Phil. I just want to jump in, kind of answer Joel's question. Something that we do all the time, and it's not scripted, is, Ken will put us in very uncomfortable situations, without telling us. So if you want to know if your mental training is working or not, just to give you a couple examples, we'd be working on a test day, setting up a race bike, and to come in and say, Ken, the bike is perfect, don't touch a thing. He'd say, great. He'd completely unwind all the settings, not tell me what they were, and he said, go and get back to the same lap time with a completely, opposite setting from what you have. Or I'd come in and he'd say, great, we're not riding your race bike today. You're riding a completely different bike you've never been on with worn tires. Go get back to the same lap time. So he'd put us in these very uncomfortable, difficult situations. And, you could jump up and down and scream, throw a tantrum or whatever, but that's actually what happens on race weekends. And we do that like every school, to where then, when things become uncomfortable or unexpected, that's the best test of your mental training, is putting you in those very difficult situations. So when they happen, you're like, oh, I've been through this 100 times with Ken. It's no big deal. Great. I don't care what the bike is. My technique is the same. The track is the same. Just go out and do it. And so when those things happen, it's no big deal. So that's a really good test of your mental training, is put yourself in those very stressful, uncomfortable situations again and again and again in training. So when they happen on race weekends, and they always do, it's no big deal because you've dealt with it before.
That's awesome.
So I want to go with list the 5 reference points again, and then also how do you build a script for an autocross, because they're kind of there's related a little bit. And the 5 reference points, and I'm going to list them in the order. So Dave, this is going to help you on the autocross. I'm going to list them in order because it's very important, right? So we have the 5 reference points, and the reference points are simply my exit apex, my exit reference point, my entry apex, my slowest point of the corner. In other words, where we're at a minimum speed, and that also corresponds to where rotation is finished. Our turn-in point, and then where we apply the brakes. So those are the 5 reference points. And then Dave, the way that works on autocross is start with your exits first. Start with your exits first. And then honestly, in autocross, because there's so little time and there's so little going on, is I will skip a little bit, is I'll work, obviously exits are what matters and when I can have the wheel unwinded, but then I'll also work on turn-in point. I'll really get to a turn-in point super early, because I know there's a lot of times I can work on rotation in the middle of the corner. I can use the controls differently to get to my exit, but we're gonna work on the exit first.
Awesome. So we've been going here for our 15 minutes. I really appreciate Ken, Phil, George, your time. I wanna say, let's leave it here. The next 3 questions, and then
I know. I'll talk all day. And I don't want to miss my bicycle ride today because I got to work on my physical fitness.
Awesome. So we'll answer these next 3 ones, and then we'll call it a day. Make sure you stay tuned, though, because these are some great questions. Next one actually comes from Mike, our other coach.
Mike, oh my God, Mike, you nailed it. I mean, yes. So Mike, real quick on this, because we can talk about.
Say the question out loud. Do you use
data?
data?
So I'll say it out loud, but this is such a great question, and we will have a separate webinar on this. But yeah, I mean, is post-session analysis, data analysis important, and how do we use it? Oh my gosh, it's so incredibly important. So, and it's, again, we could spend a whole session or a whole webinar doing the data, but yeah, the answer to your question is, yeah, the data is incredibly important. But the big thing with data is having the appropriate references to compare it to. So we have a lot of people that won't use a good comparison on their data. It has to be a known reference, obviously. Otherwise, your data is going to be skewed. So data acquisition, even as simple as a solo 2-box, is incredibly important, but having the right reference lap to compare it to, and then picking the order and what you're looking at the data, right? And the first thing that we start off when we look at data is minimum GPS speed. And we do that because that tells us whether the slow point and basically the bike or car's directions are appropriate for the reference lap. So super important.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Angelica, I think there's a bunch of things that you can do. I mean, yeah, honestly, it's semi-limitless. But I would say what you can do on a daily basis. I know when I'm driving, whether I'm going to the store or whatever, I look for exit reference points. So I look for exit reference points that tell me whether the corner that I'm doing, whether it's an on-ramp or whatever it is, where's my exit? And I just keep strengthening that. The other thing that I work on is my motor controls. I work on my initial brakes, and I work on my end of braking, and then I work on my steering wheel rate as well. Those are huge. Even walking on the sidewalk, right? Can you scan out and scan back, all right? And keep your sense. So there's tons of stuff that you can do there.
I think the other thing as well is, we talked about it before, consistency is the number one thing. So finding something that's kind of easy that you can consistently do, like literally finding 3 times a day of taking 30 seconds to just sit back, close your eyes and focus on square breathing. Like that right there, that's focusing, that's mental training. So
spot on. Yeah, spot on, Dion. And that goes, that again, the big thing that trains is taking you from an emotional state to a technical state. And I think that is huge. Yeah. So Chris Thorson. Hey Chris, so yeah, what metrics do you guys recommend tracking when you're trying to evaluate improvements in mental fitness? And I think this goes back to 2 things. And actually it goes great because it goes to Mike's part with data as well, because you're talking a little bit about data. The one is, can I stay focused longer? That, in other words, can I stay present during my session, right? Am I there, or am I thinking about, what kind of pizza am I going to have that evening? So I think staying focused longer is one. The other one is the consistency in your lap times. That's a huge one, right? So one of the things that we even have as a qualification in our methodology is, can you run 5 laps within a second? Can you run 10 laps within a half a second? Can you run 20 laps within 0.2 of a second? And then the last thing that I think that goes along, goes along with that is, I think that blends in with the consistency blends in. I think my next thing was the lap time works perfectly for that. So I think it's the lap time, how consistent the lap times can be, and how long that you can stay present with that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many subtle things, but I think when it comes back to consistency, that can be such a big thing. Because one important thing to know is it's really damn hard to improve if you're not first consistent. If you're making lots of different mistakes, it's hard to focus on one thing at a time. So consistency before improvement, focusing on one thing at a time and staying in the moment on the task at hand, I think that's the best kind of metric that you can use.
Awesome.
Well, look, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Ken, George, Phil, thank you all as well. This has been incredible. I know everyone really enjoyed it. Again, racers360.com. If you're looking for personalized coaching, more audio courses, if you want more of this, let us know. We're really excited to be part of your motorsports future.
Yeah, and my closing's this real quickly, which is you can get better at this. This is a sport. If it's a sport, it's trainable. And I think seeing that you can improve out of the car or off the bike is incredibly important. And I also think that you see the messaging between George and Phil and Dion and I, which is a consistent messaging. There are proper fundamentals to the sport, and they're in a proper order. And I think that is something that we need to get more out there in our sport. You absolutely positively can improve. Doesn't matter where you're at, you can get better. and there's a specific way to get better, and that's what this format is all about.
Love it. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for everyone as well. We'll look forward to the next one. Be safe and get a track soon.
All right.
Thank you.